Hi everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp and to the series where we go through a few new releases. We essentially review them like they used to do in the backs of gaming magazines of old, and we give them a score as well.
Yep, so we've got 3 games to look at today, 2 of which were announced during the recent Direct. So we have F-ZER0, Horizon Chase 2 and Mortal Kombat 1.
Lovely. If you want to save yourself some money, all the info's at the bottom of the screen or the description. So, are these worth buying, avoiding or waiting for a sale? Well, let's find out. Alright Glenn, we'll start with F-ZER0, which is the latest in the 99 series that Nintendo have been running. What do we think of this one?
So this takes its cues very much from the first F-ZER0 game that released back on the Super Nintendo, certainly in terms of its aesthetic, but in terms of its general gameplay. It's a racing game, a futuristic racer. Made use of Mode 7 back in the day. It was quite revolutionary back then. And this obviously adds the gameplay quirk that you're playing against 99 other people online.
Yeah, it gradually builds you up, doesn't it, with tutorials working through 25, 50 and then 99, and then it kind of lets you loose in the world stage. Now what it does really interestingly, what I thought it was, is it gives you rivals to compete against, so you're not just worrying about those 99 other, or 98
others, I think I said 99 others, yeah.
You're worrying about those rivals. It gives it a bit more focus and you don't feel as bad when you come 70th because you're racing against those.
Yeah, so your rivals are basically people that have a similar level to yourself, and by beating them you can increase that level and start to level up. Yeah. And doing so will unlock cosmetics in terms of how you can customize your car, things like player cards as well. And yeah, it just gives you a little incentive to keep going, doesn't it?
Yeah, you've got 1 of 4 different cars that you can choose from. Are they cars or are they jet bikes?
Yeah, ships. Let's go with ships.
Yeah, we're going to go with ships. You've got 1 of 4 that you can choose from. Again, you can customize them slightly, but they have different acceleration statistics and things like that. And then you head out into the race. It's quite simplistic. There is a timed boost, like you'd see in something like Mario Kart, but it's all about balancing your boost, which is also your shield, and trying to survive the other players.
Absolutely, because there's so many people on track, what you'll find quite often is you'll get caught in the middle of the pack, and once there it's very difficult to get back out. Now you do have like a swipe move that you can use on certain occasions. It has like a cooldown period that you can try and clear that pack a little bit, but as Mark said, it's very much about using your boost to get ahead but not leaving yourself so vulnerable, because it is your life bar too, that you end up crashing before you can refill it.
Yeah, there are loads of different tracks and they already have plans to add new ones in. I think this is going to be supported for quite some time. As far as criticisms go, the controls, they're absolutely fine in my opinion. In fact, they're very good. But you don't have control, obviously, of the 98 other people, and it can be a bit hit and miss, can't it, in the early stages?
It can. It can also feel very unforgiving to start with. You know, you'll go around a corner and you'll smash into the side. You know, anyone that's played this for the first time, I'm talking about myself back in the early 90s, it happens. But then you learn little tricks such as taking your finger off of accelerate for that brief moment, and it does become not just second nature but very intuitive.
This is certainly one that I think, Glenn, could feature on an addictive games list. It has that, that addictiveness where you just want one more run almost,
Yeah, and I think all of the 99 games so far have had that, and it's a very good idea. It's a very clever idea by Nintendo, actually.
It's running at 60 frames per second and this is flawless. I am very impressed with the netcode that Nintendo have built here. For a company that doesn't seem to focus on online play, to be able to bust out these games that have 199 player online, I should say, that are flawless in terms of their matchmaking. That's actually quite impressive.
It's very impressive. We were kind of joking about it as we played a moment ago that, as you say, they don't generally do it, but when they do it, they just throw it to you as if they've been doing it all their life, And yeah, hey, I have 99 players online and see how you go. And yeah, it runs fantastically well. The aesthetic in terms of the graphics, obviously it goes for that Super Nintendo original style. It looks much more crisp than it did then. And it's quite a nice throwback, actually, when it's paired with the more modern 99 take.
The final aspect then would be value. Now, obviously we know this is free if you have the Nintendo Online. My only critique, and it doesn't really apply as much to this as it would some other of the online games, I'm always in the camp that I would prefer to be able to purchase a complete package with online functionality built in and not have to worry about the online side.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think in terms of the fact that you do have to pay for online and they have offered it as free, bearing in mind it is almost solely an online game, there's no single player to it, that they've kind of hidden behind you then having to pay for online. I think the free-to-play aspect of this is very fair, but I do get your point. If there wasn't that paid structure for online, it would be nice to purchase this for a set fee and be able to play it, as per usual.
For our criteria, this one is most certainly a buy.
Let's move on to another racing game then, released at the same time as we mentioned during that Direct, and this is Horizon Chase 2. Now, I was a massive fan of the first game, Horizon Chase Turbo, which was from the team behind another Super Nintendo game, funny enough, called Top Gear, and was very much a love letter to that game and fantastic fun.
Now this time around, I don't know if it was the case for the first one, but they have partnered with Epic Games for the publishing, and this also shows very early on, and I think it's something we should bring up straight away. When you boot up the game, you are asked to sign in to your Epic Games account. Now you can get around that initially, but when you want to go to play online, it is something you are forced to do, which we don't really like that, do we?
No, I don't like that. As someone that plays on consoles, I'm sure PC gamers have dealt with such things for years, that's fair enough, but as a console gamer, it should always be about convenience and ease. That's why I play on consoles, and I don't want to have to sign up for anything to play a game that I've bought. I don't think that's fair. When we got past it the first time, when it first almost looked like it was mandatory, but you could get past it, I breathed a sigh of relief, but then as soon as you go to play online, it comes back, and you have to do it if you want to continue in online, which, yeah, that's not good.
So the first Horizon Chase Turbo, it kind of set its standard with pure quality. It was 60 FPS, no performance issues, really fluid, a very unique art style that worked well, that also reflected the retro days. The sequel tries to build upon that, but there are a few elements that feel rushed. Now we'll go for the positives first. The gameplay, it still feels great to control, doesn't it?
The gameplay is undoubtedly the best part of this. It's fantastic fun. If you enjoyed the first game, this is very much more of the same. The World Tour mode is great. You'll have to try to collect the tokens if you want to get the Super Gold Cup, and you can level up your cars and then upgrade them. It's incredibly addictive and it's incredibly endearing, just having to want to keep trying to progress and do better each time.
It controls very similar to the last game, so you're almost moving on a fixed plane, aren't you, and left and right, rather than you feeling like you're driving around the track. It's like the track's coming towards you.
Yep, it uses, or it doesn't use, but it feels as if it uses a method very similar to Mode 7, which I mentioned for the original F-ZERO, where it does exactly that. It almost feels like the track moves around you, and you're almost looking past your car into the near distance to be ready to make those turns or to steer into those turns. It doesn't feel exactly like that. I mean, you are clearly moving on the track. You can crash out, of course, but it does just have that old school feel to it, There
are free boosts that you get at the start. There's also a timing in terms of making a good start at the beginning. But as far as gameplay, for me, it feels very similar to the first game, and that's not a negative.
No, it is what it is. And if you like the first game, that's a positive. If you wanted a bit more, you'll have to make that decision. In terms of the visuals and performance, now visually, let's start there. It definitely changes from the first game, which used that kind of, or it looked like Top Gear on the Super Nintendo. It had that kind of, top of the screen was you racing, bottom of the screen was your map. It had a low poly style, I should say as well. Sorry, and the reason I say that is because this one seems to continue in some aspects in terms of foreground objects, things like trees, whereas your car looks a bit more, almost like cel shaded to a degree, and the backgrounds have that bit more detail in them. It's quite a nice mix, quite an unusual mix, but it does work well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first game, it had that low poly look. This one does look more modern, but it doesn't look cheap, and that is a difficult line to walk, isn't it?
Yes, it is. What I will say is I felt that because the first game went solely for low poly style, the colours popped a little bit more. Now that's not to say this isn't a colourful game, because it absolutely is. You'll see some of the footage now as we're talking, but there's just something about just that pure low poly style that the colours seem to fly into you as you were driving. Here they seem a bit more contained, which just, it loses a slight element of that colour saturation, whereas it gains in other areas,
It's exactly what we've seen with something completely different. The iOS or operating systems on phones and other things, they used to have gradients.
Yes.
So gradients is more what this uses. So the colours aren't one bold, bright colour, they had a gradient within them. And you actually lose a bit of the instant visual pop.
Yes, the pop, yeah, exactly right.
So performance on there as well is an issue in a couple of areas. Firstly, it's not quite finished yet. In the menus, you've got the button prompts at the bottom of the screen. They're all wrong, aren't they?
Yeah, for anything you want to do, so, move between maps, to go into your upgrade system, to back to the menu, they all say RB. There's not even an RB button on the Switch. I'm sure they meant R, but obviously they're all wrong. So you're going to have to kind of just press everything, and for now, until they patch it, work out what's what. It just looks very unprofessional. Yeah. It's such a glaring error. It makes you feel like this was rushed out for that direct.
Absolutely right, yeah. And in the performance is also affected on many of the tracks. You'll see some slight drops. Now with that said, we were still finding that the controls actually were fine, but yeah, they do need a bit of patchwork, yeah.
So all told then, a good game does need a patch, certainly needs a patch in terms of performance and polish. Wait for a sale, I'd say, on this one.
Absolutely. Last but not least then, we have Mortal Kombat 1, which has had its fair share of comparison videos on the Nintendo Switch version. And look, as we already knew, if you take a current gen game, you squash it down onto the Nintendo Switch, the visuals are going to take a hit. Now, my main port of call in terms of comparison was Mortal Kombat 11 on Switch, which obviously looked very blurry, but performance-wise, it was actually quite good.
Yeah, in terms of performance for 11 I'm talking about, as far as I can remember, it was a solid 60. As you said, it looked incredibly blurry. The hair looked... it was like they'd put their fingers in a plug socket. But I'd take performance over visual fidelity in a fighting game, you know?
Exactly, and they've gone the other way here. I think the visual fidelity is much cleaner, much crisper, still obviously much lower than other platforms, but it does suffer in a few performance drops, well, more than a few, which I think would really affect fighting game fans when they're playing competitively, particularly online.
Yeah, I think that's a good use of word there. It certainly looks crisper. Doesn't necessarily mean it looks better, but it looks much crisper than 11 on the Switch. Again, we're only comparing to another Switch game. But if that comes at the cost of some drops, I think I'd have preferred they'd have gone the same way as before. As much as it looked like an eyesore, it's about that performance, you know?
What I will say is the story mode, which is, I'd say, the main mode of the game, other than Towers, and there's one other, is brilliant. The actual way it tells its story is incredibly good. Now, it does use full motion video, so essentially the same technique that was used in Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, but that's the same thing they've used on the other platforms, to my understanding. Unfortunately, the Switch version, again, suffers from a few stutters here. Load times are very long. These things, when you're in-game and fighting, mostly don't affect your experience, and I really enjoyed the gameplay. I think it's Mortal Kombat, you know. I like these modern games. I feel like they've really evolved the formula nicely. But when I went online, got my ass handed to me on a plate, it was a mixture of me being rubbish and a few performance drops, which cost me my moves. So yeah, that would also affect the gameplay score.
I think what you can say about Mortal Kombat more so than any other fighter is that because they have gone down this story route, certainly since 9, you know, you do get your value for money there in terms of enjoying that story more so than just having to rely solely on the fighting, as much as obviously that should be a huge part of the game. So I do think that the fact it has gone with this reboot style, that will work for it in terms of its value, but it is still £60 for the base game, which is very, very expensive.
Yeah, you're going to struggle to justify that if you have any other platform to play it on, in all honesty. But really an enjoyable game, good online if you like it. It's not going to get any better than this, if I'm honest.
I think with all that considered, I mean, I won't be waiting for a sale necessarily, but I'll be waiting for the physical to come out and for it to kind of just naturally drop into a price zone that fits me more than £60, which it will do, I think, relatively quickly. They generally do.
Yeah, and I will say that with the previous one, Mortal Kombat 11, they did patch a couple of times, didn't they?
They did.
So maybe wait to see how it pans out, as Glenn says as well.
Yeah.
So that's it for this buy, avoid or wait for a sale list. We didn't have any kill it with fires, so that was nice. I didn't even tell you about that category, Glenn.
You didn't? That sounds very interesting.
It's very rarely used, but it has been used once. Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments, if you picked any of these up, and your own thoughts.
Lovely job. Don't forget, as Mark said at the beginning, if you're looking to pick any of these games up, or anything else, of course, for that matter, you can get your eShop cards on our website, switchup.gg. Doing so will earn you 5% back in cash back via our coins, and you can get another 5% off straight discount if you use the code SwitchUp. There's also a link down there to PlayAsia. If you're looking to import any games, use the link, use the code stated, and you'll get yourself 5% off of your order from there. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.